Fellas, if you're watching this, there's a high chance that you're an MMA fan, and there's also another high chance that one of your favourite fighters are Charles Oliveira and Alex Pereira. I've noticed that in a lot of MMA fans, Oliveira and Alex Pereira tend to be in a lot of people's kind of like favourite fighter lists, and I've been wondering why that is. Is it because of their personality? Is it because of how they fight? Or is it because of other reasons? So today we're going to be discussing why exactly UFC fans or MMA fans love Charles Oliveira and Alex Pereira. Please let me know if they're one of your favourites as well, or if you're the complete opposite and you absolutely hate them and despise them. But today we're going to be taking a look at why people like them. And first of all, we're going to start off with the similarities between Charles Oliveira and Alex Pereira. So first of all, listen, this is a serious one. They've both got Era in their name. I'm just going to throw it out there. They're both Brazilian. I don't know if that has anything to do with why people like them. I'm just saying they're both Brazilian, maybe. I don't know, maybe they've got a huge Brazilian fan base behind them. They both have a genuine career story. Obviously, Charles Oliveira went from being a really poor guy and grew up in Sao Paulo, then the favelas, and then eventually became this, MMA fighter, UFC fighter. Wasn't very good, and then turned his career around. And then Alex Pereira, obviously, he was like an alcoholic until he was in his 20s, and then turned it around, and then became one of the best combat sports athletes of all time. They're both very exciting to watch. I've never known anyone say that, an Alex Pereira fight or a Charles Oliveira fight is boring, especially in like recent MMA. They're both some of the most exciting fighters to watch in the UFC. The lead up to the fight and everything about the fight, I just find them really exciting, and they're both champion level fighters as well. Like, they've both been champion before. Charles Oliveira lost it to Islam. Alex lost it to Adesanya. They could both be champions again. That's the thing. They're both high level, champion level fighters. So we know that we're going to be getting some of the best fights from them both. But we're going to start off with Charles Oliveira. Why do people like Charles Oliveira so much? Well, we're going to be talking about his personality first. He's a likeable guy. Charles Oliveira is one of the most likeable guys in UFC. He doesn't really trash talk much. Unless he's forced to, like he was against Islam. But he's a very likable guy. Like, when I win, not when I win, when Charles Oliveira wins, it makes me proud to be Brazilian, and I'm not even Brazilian. I don't know what it is about Oliveira. He's just a really likable guy. It's kind of like he's got all the MMA fans on his side. We all want to see him win no matter who he's fighting, whether it's Gaethje, whether it's Islam, whether it's Beneil Dariush. We want to see Oliveira win. And I've put he isn't English. Now, I've heard a lot of MMA fans saying, oh, if Charles Oliveira was English, he'd be one of the biggest stars in the sport. Dude, I don't think it's got anything to do with English. I think Charles Oliveira not being able to say anything or not being able to speak English and only being able to say a few words in English like, hello, Vancouver. I think that's why Charles Oliveira's a great fighter. I don't know. I just feel like that's why I like him a lot more, the fact that he isn't English. I think that kind of adds to his character, and he's very charismatic as well. Like, he's not boring. I said he's a likable guy. He doesn't really trash talk, but I'm not saying he's boring. He's very charismatic. You see him in the lead up to fights, and obviously in the octagon, his celebrations, everything about Charles Oliveira, his post-fight interviews. He's a very charismatic guy. He's pretty humble as well. He doesn't really tend to make excuses. I know he kind of said that after the Islam loss, it was he didn't really blame anything besides the fact that he wasn't the same. And I'm not saying I'm not saying he's now going to destroy Islam, but he's pretty humble, never really tends to trash talk opponents after he loses to them. I mean, it's very, very rare that he actually loses nowadays. And like I said before, he has a great life story. Charles Oliveira grew up pretty much nothing, then went into the UFC. He wasn't a great UFC fighter in his early UFC career. He was getting stopped quite a lot. He was a bit of a quitter, and then he went on this massive winning streak up to the lightweight belt. Eventually lost it to Islam, but then he's just coming off an insane win over Beneil Dariush. So you look at Charles Oliveira's personality, it's kind of hard to dislike him. He's never really coming out with these delusional takes. He's never really beefing with anybody. It's kind of hard to dislike the guy. He doesn't really come across as someone that I'd want to hate. The only reason I can see people disliking Charles Oliveira as a person is if you're an Islam Makhachev fan and you want to see Islam Makhachev do well. Apart from that, I don't know why people want to see Charles do badly in the UFC, but that's his personality. Then we're going to move on to him as a fighter. Now, him as a fighter, why do people like him so much as a fighter? Well, first of all, he's high level. He's not just one of these unranked guys who people tend to look at a lot. He's extremely high level. I mean, he was literally champion. He's finished Gaethje, finished Poirier, finished Beneil Dariush, finished Michael Chandler, and he had a decent fight with Islam Makhachev until he got finished. But he's extremely high level. Charles Oliveira. He's an amazing striker. He hits hard. Great Thai boxing as well. And obviously he's got some of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the UFC, so he's extremely high level, and he's got such a fun style. I don't think Charles Oliveira would be liked if he was just one of these guys that, like Charles Oliveira, as good as his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, you never see him going for takedowns and just kind of pinning people until he finds a submission. He's willing to stay on the feet, is Charles Oliveira. He's willing to strike with people, and that's why he's got such a fun style, because he always, in pretty much all of his fights, he has success on the feet. And that's why I think Charles Oliveira, his style is so good. And even his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's not boring BJJ. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is fun. He's always finding submissions out of nowhere, so he's got a fun style, and he finishes most of his fights. Charles Oliveira hasn't had a decision in so long. He's coming off a first-round win over Beneil Dariush. Before that, he got finished by Islam. Before that, he finished Poirier. Before that, he finished Gaethje. Before that, he finished Michael Chandler. It's been so long since he's got a decision. What was it, the Ferguson fight since he got a decision? I don't know, but most of the time he is finishing fights, and it ends pretty quickly, so we know what to expect. And he goes against the odds a lot. The amount of people I saw picking Poirier to beat Oliveira, and even look at the MMA YouTube community, the amount of people that were saying Beneil Dariush is going to beat Charles Oliveira. He always goes against the odds, and you never know what to expect. And because he goes, that's what I mean. Because he goes against the odds, you never really know what to expect from Charles Oliveira. You could be expecting, for all we know, Charles Oliveira could go out there and sleep Islam Makhachev in, a couple of seconds. The way this year's been going, we have absolutely no idea, but that's why he's just a mysterious, maybe not mysterious, but unexpected, fun fighter is Charles Oliveira, and that's why I think a lot of MMA fans tend to like Charles Oliveira a lot. And next we're going to move on to Alex Pereira. A lot of people tend to like Alex Pereira as well. We're going to look at his personality. A lot of people tend to say that Alex Pereira has no personality, and he does. He's just not one of these loud, trash-talking guys. Well, first of all, he's Izzy's #1 hater. If you've been around the MMA community, you should know that Israel Adesanya is one of the most hated UFC fighters in the world, one of the most hated MMA fighters in the world. So many people dislike Adesanya, and Alex Pereira beat him in kickboxing twice, moves over to the UFC, steals his belt, then he goes out there and beats Jan Blachowicz, the only guy to beat Adesanya, and then he trains Sean Strickland to beat Adesanya. He's literally Izzy's #1 hater. If you look at his career, everything, I'm not being serious with this, but a lot of the things Alex Pereira does tends to be against Izzy, and because so many people hate Izzy, that's why they like Alex Pereira. He's also very stoic. A lot of people kind of like the fact that he's so stoic, and listen, I wouldn't want to fight Alex Pereira. If I was signed to the UFC and I was in the light heavyweight division, I would not want to fight Alex Pereira. He's very stoic, and I kind of find that like a cool. He's kind of like the villain that everyone loves. Like Alex Pereira, he just reminds me of the villain that everybody loves. No one really wants to see him lose, but we all know he's kind of the bad guy leading up to most fights, but that's the perfect way I can describe it. He's quiet as well. He's never coming out with these delusional takes, or he's never saying all these bad things about. He's never really trash talking. He can get in opponent's head. He can get in the heads of his opponents without even having to say a word. And he's also very likable and humble. We just saw at UFC 293, Strickland beat Adesanya. And leading up to that fight, Strickland was coached heavy by Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira said he didn't take any credit for that. He said it's all Strickland. It wasn't me that got the win for Strickland. It was Strickland himself. He's a very likable and humble guy. But at the same time, he's this kind of stoic Brazilian warrior that just came out of nowhere and absolutely destroyed Adesanya. And I think he's going to be the UFC light heavyweight champion by the end of the year. That's if he actually faces Yuri for their belt, but I think he could be light heavyweight champion. And look at his career as well. I'll talk that more in the fight. We'll talk about Alex Pereira as a fighter now, because we need to talk about him as a fighter. Now, before I get into anything, there's a conversation going on that Alex Pereira might be one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time. Two-time champion, I don't know if it was a two-time champion or a two-weight division champion. I think he was a two-time champion in, or it might have been a two-weight champion in Glory Kickboxing. Then he becomes a middleweight champion in the UFC. And now if he becomes a light heavyweight champion in the UFC, the amount of combat sports things this guy's achieved, you've got to give it to Alex Pereira, man. But he's extremely dangerous as a fighter. There's nothing better than watching a dangerous fighter who can put someone's lights out just like that. Like a Francis Ngannou or a Derek Lewis. But we've got one in the middleweight division or now the light heavyweight division. He's such a dangerous fighter and he could end it at any moment with Alex Pereira. Like he did with Sean Strickland. Like he's done in the past. He's very, very dangerous, and I feel like a lot of fighters aren't really willing to engage with him because of that. He's very technical as well. He's super high level. Is Alex Pereira. He's always a very calm fighter. He's so calm in his fights. But he's very, very technical, one of the most technical kickboxers in the UFC. Some people like to make the argument that he's the best striker in the UFC right now. He's got a really fun fight style as well. He's never really... Alex Pereira is yet to kind of have a boring fight in the UFC. The only shades of a boring fight we've seen is the first round against Jan Blachowicz, and that wasn't even Alex Pereira's fault. Every other fight... Like, when I was watching Alex Pereira versus Adesanya, that might have been the highest level striking matchup in the UFC I've ever seen. At least that has to be up there with the most high-level striking we've ever seen in the UFC. Such a fun style, and like I said before, he's champion material. He's genuinely going to be champion. He's been champion before. He's just a fun kickboxer with a personality that you can't hate him for. And he could put anyone's lights out at any moment. He could knock out Yuri Prohaska for all we know, which is there's a high chance he could do that because he's got power and he's technical. So that's why I think a lot of people tend to like Alex Pereira a lot. And yeah, that is the reasons, that is personally why I think MMA fans like Charles Oliveira and Alex Pereira a lot. If you're a fan of these two, please let me know why you like these guys as fighters. But yeah, that is why I think MMA fans like them both so much. If you agree with these takes, please let me know, and thank you for watching.